after I left Walmart and kind of did some soul searching, I realized, I don't want to have to work 7 days a week, be randomly off on Monday and Wednesday, have to work every single holiday for about 12 hours a day. I didn't want that for my life. So I was like, you know what? I want to find a job at a bank, get some stability and some regular hours in my life, and, just generally be happy. Boy, was I wrong, but grass always looks greener. So I started putting out my resume, and I got a job at a credit union. And the interesting thing about this credit union was it was union. Like, union, like Knights of Labor, local tradesman union. They were connected to where my dad used to work. So in a union environment, everything is based on seniority. So everybody that gets hired in, like I got hired in with another lady on the same day. She had much more experience than I did. I had none, and she'd worked for 15 years in a different role at a different place, and I ended up being ahead of her in seniority because our names were different. I was like, oh, that's a little unreasonable, but that's how it worked in the union. But it also meant that if you wanted to move up, someone else had to leave, and someone else had to have moved up. And if someone's on maternity leave, they can bump you right back. So it was incredibly complicated and convoluted. I didn't realize that at the time because I was like, I'll just work part-time then move up to full-time. No, I didn't know that some of the other part-timers, because there were a bunch of us, had been there for a couple years and were just waiting with bated breath to move up. But if somebody went on maternity leave and they came back 3 months later, you got bumped back to part-time. Tough shit. You're back to part-time. And part-time was awful. Because at the time, and they complained constantly of, well, because of Obamacare, we can't give you any hours. If you get more than 30 hours, we have to give you insurance. And if we give you insurance, the building will catch on fire because we don't want to spend that kind of money on you. Thus, we only were able to work I worked lunch breaks, so that meant I'd come in at like 10:30, go to lunch at 2, get off at like 3. And then we worked every single Saturday. And that gets old after a while because there was no Saturdays off. Well, they were open every Saturday. It didn't matter. It was a snow day. They were open. And I know you're thinking, oh, that can't be that bad. Just a credit union. Here's the key thing about credit unions. They do what's called shared branching. What that is if you bank at another credit union in another state, another city, what have you, you can go there to perform transactions. Like you make loan payments. There's a limit to what you can do, but you can do transactions. So that meant if you're the only credit union in town open, people would come in from other credit unions to do transactions. So it just make you hate yourself because they come in, this is my account number. Oh, I can't find you in the system. Oh, I forgot. This is with such and such credit union. I just expected you to know that because reasons. You just knew. And dealing with that every Saturday. People constantly coming in with transactions from Navy Federal or other random credit unions. Which is a nice thing. I get it. Just for the people working. Just imagine like working at, say, like thinking of a huge bank, Chase Bank, and you had to do transactions for 3 other banks. You'd never have an idle moment. The other thing was they were hung up on, we don't have customers, we have members. Don't call them customers, they're members. They're members. And the other drawback was with banks and Walmart's too, they have what's called first of the month branches. I mean, a lot of people get their checks on the first of the month or the third. So on the first of the month, people would be lined up in lawn chairs, waiting in line for the bank to open. And they'd seriously be lined up down the block. It was crazy because the money wasn't going anywhere. And if the money stayed in an extra day, it wouldn't get cold. That isn't how money works, but nothing would do until the people came in, got every last penny of their check out, and withdrew it. And after months of this, of not getting enough hours, got paid every week though. Getting paid every week was a plus. I ended up switching to, or finding a job with Verizon. It was actually pretty funny. I went in for the interview, and the guy interviewing me, he's like, "Oh, just tell me about yourself." "Oh, did you look on my resume?" He's like, "No, man, I didn't look at your resume." I said, "I never look at those. You could have said you were Pope." I said, "You wouldn't believe the stuff people make up on there." And he is right. No one ever looks at a resume. I can't tell you how many times I interviewed where they didn't look, and they're like, "Oh, you work there." Their first time looking at it was as soon as they interviewed me. But I got hired on. The pay was worse, but the hours were full time. This job had its own drawbacks, because for the first 2 weeks I trained and couldn't get commission anyway, so it was just over the top training, doing the computer-based learnings. You kind of know how it is at places. When you start, you'll do training. And I remember the hardest test was fire safety. It took me forever to pass that, because you had to know a lot about fire safety to work in a shopping center, and who knew? But as I worked there, I learned there's just cracks in the system where if you didn't meet your goals, well, hey, what's going on? You need to work on that. And there were so many goals. We had a goal for how many phones we sold, how many products we sold. We had a goal for insurance, a goal for conversion. Conversion is where everybody that comes in the store buys something, but you'd have people coming in the store by accident because there's a nail shop next door. Guess what? That counted against you. Somebody coming in to make a bill payment, that counted against you. They had facial recognition. Like, somebody came in, like, say somebody's girlfriend or wife or relative came in to give them something, that counted against you. And then there was all kinds of other buckets, and they'd be reaming you about stuff that meant pennies on your paycheck. Like, everybody that came in, you had to pull up their account. If you didn't do that, well, what's going on? Why aren't you pulling up their account? Looking for opportunities. That old lady's got an old phone line on there. You need to put a tablet on it. Because there was just so much just lying and deceit. It'd always be like, "Oh, they're interested in that phone." Well, tell them it comes with a tablet. And I do it because I needed the money, and the sales tactics were basically, "Hey, you either meet your goals or you're fired." But then a month later, they'd come in, "Why did my bill go up?" I don't know. Because when you get a new product with a carrier, they will, for having a new line, they'll charge you arbitrarily for that, like $30. So your next bill just looks like really huge. And people are like, "Well, what's going on with that?" It makes you not want to buy a new phone. And then I'm an iPhone person. I prefer it, but their iPhones didn't pay that good a commission. So they're like, "Well, you need to push this Motorola or this Google phone." And I'd have good, because it's 2-week cycles. I had good weeks and I had bad weeks. Although the people I worked with, one guy, he was a great salesman. I can't deny that. But he was also friends with the district manager. So he somehow could not balance a register that was the easiest register to balance. We kept $100 in there. And whatever you had over $100 at the end of the day, checks or cash, that was the deposit. It was that easy, and he messed it up every time he closed. It got so bad that they didn't have him open or close. They would just have him work a mid-shift. That's how juiced in he was. And he also pulled some crazy stuff. Like, he'd help people with their phones, but if the girl was cute, he'd put his number in there. And I learned all this from, we had a marketing rep who got all the complaints. And he said, yeah, all the complaints I get from him is, why did this guy put his number in my wife's phone? Or they'd ask, why is he texting me when I didn't give him my number? And there were always complaints. And if they wanted to, they're like, hey, you got a complaint, you need to work on that. It just, nothing was ever good enough. It didn't matter if you had a great sales period, the last period, you better buck up. Because my first sales period, I did great. The second one, I barely missed my goal, and you'd think I killed a nun. You need to do better. If you have another sales period like that, we're going to have to consider letting you go. And just that environment. Another time I was looking at a customer's phone to see if it was salvageable, and I was trying to fix it, and my manager took me aside, hey, don't try to fix that phone, then they won't buy anything. Oh, that's fine. Let's just cheat the customers. And then it was just anything to get a sale. Like, anything to meet that goal that day. It didn't matter what it took. If that old person with a flip phone comes in, they need a smartphone. Doesn't matter they don't know how to use it. And it doesn't matter that when you sell it to them and they come back in every day for help with it and it hurts your conversion and they're wondering why your conversion's so low. So eventually I ended up looking for something else.